Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra, because we are on a Wednesday. Oh my goodness me, it's the middle of the working week already. Where did that go? It only feels like 2 days ago. Oh, here he is. It only feels like 2 days ago I was powering up the iMac to start the working week, and yet 2 days later, here we are in the middle of the working week. It doesn't make sense, does it, Derp? Anyway, here we are in the library, as you can see. I've got his derpiness moving across my lap here. What are we reading? We are still reading the excellent Ghost Stations by the late great Bruce Barrymore Halpenny, who I was very sad to see passed away about 10 years ago. So I'm just going to turn the blur down a bit because it's a little bit on the strong side tonight. We do like a bit of blur in the background. Yeah, that's better. That's much better. So anyway, that's Ghost Stations, cracking book. What are we drinking tonight? Well, it's a 2 beer strategy tonight, and it's a cider and a beer strategy tonight. So I've got some from Lidl. It's the Sotma strawberry and lime premium cider, vegan and gluten-free. Apple cider with natural strawberry and lime flavorings, best served over ice for a taste of summer at any time of the year! Exclamation mark. 3.4%, so not bad, not bad. And we will be following that up after half time with some Rheinbacher Weissbier. What are we washing it down with? We are washing it down again from Lidl, the Western Gold Honey, which is like a Tennessee whiskey. Oh, what do you know? We haven't even read a ghost story yet, and already we have a dead soldier. And run, BT.
Oh, it's jolly nice of you. Hello, dead soldier. Seen plenty of those in my time.
Oh, I love that film. Right, here we go. The Ghosts of Death Valley. During the early months of 1944, in the campaign to recapture Burma, a desperate struggle was taking place to gain control of the hill sections around the village of Kohima in the Naga Hills in Nagaland near the Burmese border. The Japanese had dug themselves into high ground east of Mount Japwo, which is some 3,000 meters high, and to supply 31st Brigade, hundreds of sorties by Dakota aircraft were flown to the area to supply drop ammunition, food, and other supplies to our hard-pushed troops. Just turn the camera down a bit, that's better. These drops were carried out in appalling weather conditions, and inevitably the Royal Air Force suffered losses, with crews that just seemed to be swallowed up by the rich jungle. Okay, he's shortened the word Japanese here. I'm not going to read it out because it's a racial slur. So the Japanese supply lines were eventually cut, and thousands of their men died through starvation and malnutrition. Others were winkled out of their foxholes to be slaughtered by our own troops. The few that got away made all haste to get back across the Chindwin River into Burma. In January 1947, long after the thunder of cannon and the roar of aircraft had subsided, the Royal Air Force set up special jungle search units to locate the many hundreds of crashes during the war and to recover, if possible, the bodies of the crews for eventual burial by the War Graves Commission. One of the search team's many missions was to proceed into the Kohima Valley, which runs between Mount Japwo and the Naga Hill tracks. The valley roughly runs west to east down to the Chindwin River. It was standard practice to recruit local guides for these missions, mainly because they knew the best tracks and also because, in many instances, local villagers had found aircraft and decently buried the crews, or in a very few instances had rescued survivors, or even in a very few instances had rescued survivors. In this particular mission, it soon became obvious that guides were going to be very hard to come by. According to one headman, the valley was dead. No life of any description walked or flew in the valley, and it was basically taboo to enter. We did manage to procure the services of 3 Naga Hill tribesmen who are made of somewhat sterner stuff than the average plainsman, said Warrant Officer Len Devonshire. And after due preparation, we proceeded into the low foothills that drop down into the valley. Sorry, I was singing the Clash there. After many days, it became obvious to the most insensitive of their party of 9 that the usual jungle sounds were growing less each day. The daytime bustle of birds had ceased, and even the humble cricket had been silenced. The deeper they went into the valley, the quieter it became, until it seemed the only noise was the rattle of their equipment and their subdued voices. All around seemed to be an air of depression and sadness. Although the jungle had long since clothed the scars of war in its dark green mantle, the ghosts of Kohima weighed heavily on the new life and subdued its normal chatter, said Len Devonshire. He continued, our team were no softies, men who spent their time digging up, in some instances, their old comrades and transporting skeletons obtain an inherent hardening against ghosties or things that go bump in the night. But in this instance, we were all most pleased to leave the area when our grisly mission had been completed and return to our normal, if Spartan world. One airman, who was an ex-merchant navy sailor from Grimsby in Lincolnshire, swore that at night the small sacks that we collected the remains in rattled and moved, but only whilst we were in the valley. As we left, they too seemed to go back to their rightful sleep. Superstitious sailors and natives may be, but there was no member of that search team that had any doubts whatever that they had been into Death Valley with its hundreds of lost souls. 37 years later, Flight Lieutenant Len Devonshire, now retired from the Royal Air Force, recalls those months spent in the jungle searching for lost crews. It was a heartbreaking mission, and even to this day, I can still see all those skeletons. In many cases, it was impossible to sort them out, and we had to collect up what we could. Very few natives would enter Death Valley, and the very mention brought fear into their eyes. I think that definitely deserves a thunderclap. No, it's not real thunder, Derp. You can't hear that anyway. You're as deaf as a post. So let's have some of this strawberry and lime cider from Lidl. So slow to me, everybody. It just tastes like squash, quite frankly. It's not really fizzy. If you didn't know it was alcoholic, you wouldn't know it was alcoholic. So anyway, the next story is the Lavenham experience. Over a morning cup of coffee, June Constable and her friend Philippa decided to get away from London and spend a day in East Anglia. I'm sure I read this one the other week, but never mind. It was September 1976, and a bright sunny day. They had decided to see the very interesting old wall town of Lavenham in Suffolk, and to have lunch at the noted hostelry there called the Swan. They set out in high spirits, looking forward to a day out from London. They chatted as they drove along, and they were making good time as they passed through Sudbury. They were now nearing Lavenham, and turning, as they thought, onto a side road, found instead they were driving up an old runway. Somehow they had managed to get lost and had ended up on the old airfield of Lavenham. Lavenham was built during 1943 to 44, and it housed the Americans. The 487th Bomb Group flew B-24s, Liberators, and B-17s, flying fortresses, from Lavenham, and it was their home during those dark war years. The American bombers attacked both tactical and strategic targets, which included targets in support of D-Day, and then into the heart of Nazi Germany with attacks on Berlin and many other cities. Bruce, I think you could have substituted attacks with raids and missions and sorties. So that's the writer in me doing that. Sorry, Bruce. They spent their last days on Earth at Lavenham, and they made the most of each day in a carefree manner to help relieve the tension. June and Philippa drove slowly. Sorry, I got a bit Terry Scott there. June and Philippa drove along slowly with the car windows open, looking at what was once a busy bomber station. As they drove along, they passed hangars, the control tower, and other old wartime buildings. They stopped the car whilst they decided how to get off the airfield, and for some unknown reason, they sat almost rooted to the spot as if held by an unknown force. It was just before midday on a lovely, bright, sunny day. A bit like today, Derp. No, it's been grey and miserable. Never mind. I shall always remember saying, "Oh, do hurry, I don't like it here," June Constable recalls. There was a feeling of being held back and laughter, and we felt almost like intruders. From being an ordinary happy morning, suddenly I felt catapulted back in time, almost as though I was surrounded by young people, active and alive. But they were not. The laughter seemed resentful in an amused kind of way, as though these young boys' spirits had suddenly been intruded upon by us and were laughing at us. And the fact that we reacted to the situation by feeling this. Also, a feeling of great sadness enveloped the airfield, and the bright day was gone. It was a most unexpected and strange event. June and Philippa talked about it over lunch, and it coloured the whole of their day. Being in her late 40s, Mrs. June Constable is not one with a vivid imagination. There is still much to see of the old Lavenham airfield, which is just off the A1141 road. Many of the wartime buildings are still standing and hold many mysteries from those hectic wartime days. An eerie atmosphere. June Constable said she would not go there again. She will never forget the Lavenham experience. It just happened out of the blue. She has never spoken of it to many people, for, as she says, it seemed so amazing I didn't like it one bit. It could hardly be true, but it was. It definitely deserves a thunderclap, that. Now, when I bought this book, 1990, I was 23. So when you're reading a book and somebody is described as being in their late 40s, you think to yourself, goodness me, that's old. I'm only in my early 20s. Late 40s, that's old. Late 40s is 10 years younger than where I am now in my penultimate year in my 50s. I'll be 60 next year. I can't believe that. Derp, I can't believe that. But then again, if it hadn't been for the intervention of a very good friend and the superb professionalism of the National Health Service, I wouldn't be here. So no complaints. Anyway, in the magnificent Rush beer glass, thank you, viewers Kirsten and Steve, the United States. Cheers, me beers. I get the feeling we've read most of these next ones. So I'm going to go back to the preface at the beginning. Let's see if I can find. Okay, well, we're going to dip into the preface here because preface. Yeah, we'll just dip into this. Is it time for a bump, Derp? I think it is. I think it's bump time. I'm also keeping half an eye on the fact that I've got to be off sharpish at about 9 o'clock tonight to go and watch the football. So, do you know what? We're not going to bother with the preface because that's too long. We will crack on the next ghost story, the ghosts of Davistow Moor. Take things easy and get yourself out of London, was the advice given to Prudence Pepper by her doctor. She had just recovered from a lung infection, so on his advice, she and her friend rented the small cottage on the edge of Bodmin Moor in Cornwall. It was July 1959, and they soon settled into the cottage. Coming from the busy London life to the absolute silence of Bodmin Moor, they soon noticed a lot of cattle smuggling and other goings-on in that part of Cornwall. But with living in such an isolated spot, they decided to be like the three brass monkeys: hear all, see all, and say nothing. Surely that's hear nothing, see nothing, say nothing. Anyway, however, having accepted the nocturnal goings-on, Miss Pepper only wished to be left alone and mind her own business. But there was something else. After only a few days at the cottage, Miss Pepper became aware of strange noises from the direction of the moor, usually in the dead of night. She didn't tell her friend for fear of being ridiculed. Being an ex-ambulance driver cum dispatch rider in the London Fire Service during the Second World War, Miss Pepper bought an old ex-army motorbike in order to get out and see the countryside. Her friend was a keen gardener, so Miss Pepper had plenty of time to get out and about. As the noises had persisted over the weeks, Miss Pepper decided to investigate. Up until now, she had shut them out of her mind. However, it was a beautiful day and she set out for Camelford. Then, just past Camelford, turned right onto Davidstow, crossed over a cattle grid, and after passing a pig farm on her right, found herself on an old wartime airfield. It was isolated and bleak. The airfield was Davistow Moor, and it had opened in October 1942. It was the highest operational airfield in the United Kingdom. And with being so, it suffered from persistent low cloud. It was a big airfield with 3 concrete runways and 50 panhandle dispersal pads. It was not a very popular posting. It first housed some American units flying B-17 Flying Fortresses, then number 304 Polish Squadron, and then 547 Squadron for anti-submarine operations over the Bay of Biscay. In 1944, units at the airfield were 144 and 404 Royal Canadian Air Force squadrons with Bristol Beaufighters. Number 282 Squadron with Vickers Warwicks, and number 524 Squadron with Vickers Wellingtons. The Warwick was a development of the Wellington, by the way. But poor weather conditions made it very difficult. Poor weather conditions made it a very difficult airfield to operate from. And after only 2 years, it closed to flying. And for the rest of the war, was used by the Royal Air Force Regiment as a training camp. Davidstow Moor finally closed in December 1945. Actually, we are going to have a quick swig of... Still got a bit of a sore throat from the old cold. Prudence Pepper stood in the middle of the old airfield and looked around at the derelict buildings. The southern part of the airfield had been taken over by the Forestry Commission, and Miss Pepper stood looking at acres of trees. 2 new roads had been built across the airfield, and at one side was a derelict control tower. The runways were still in pretty good condition. Just the ideal place for smuggling, thought Miss Pepper. Well, Derpy's just got off me that. She continued across the airfield to Altarnham and stopped at an inn for lunch. Having made her plan, she returned home to prepare herself for the night. It was a Thursday night, it was a Thursday night, having heard these other eerie noises for the past 2 Thursday nights. Sorry, it was a Thursday night, having heard these other eerie noises for the past 2 Thursday nights. Just before dusk, Miss Pepper arrived back at the old airfield and, after hiding her motorbike, made her way to the top of the old control tower and settled down to wait. It was a clear night, and from the top of the control tower, she had a clear view of the 2 runways. "I must have dozed off," said Miss Pepper, "for I was suddenly awoken and heard sounds of activity around me. It was just after 3:30 a.m., and the intermittent droning noises grew louder, just as if aeroplanes were coming in to land. I could clearly see the runways, but could not see any planes. They seemed to overshoot with a swooshing sound and then crash at the end of the runway, for there were then flames in that direction, followed by skidding noises. A lot of voices and activity. This happened 3 or 4 times, and then all was quiet." Oh, I got itchy nose now. Do apologise. Prudence Pepper sat rooted to the spot. It was unbelievable, and she estimated that the incident lasted about 6 minutes. Dazed and bewildered, she got up and staggered down the old broken steps in the control tower. For the next half hour, she wandered up and down the runways, looking for tracks, skid marks, or anything to ease her puzzled mind. But there were no signs of disturbance. "My feelings at that time were more of curiosity rather than fear," recalls Miss Pepper. "I do, however, remember feeling very sad, intermixed with a kind of elation." Miss Pepper got back home just after dawn. She did not tell her friend where she had been or what she had heard and seen. The following week, Miss Pepper had cause to see again the old Davidstone Moor airfield at night. After a night out playing darts at a pub the other side of the moor, Miss Pepper was returning home on her motorbike with a local poacher on the pillion. The narrow road cut through the old airfield. "We were about halfway across," said Miss Pepper, "when in my headlights I picked up this car that was lying sideways across the narrow road. I slowed up and stopped the bike. We hurried towards the car and noticed how strange it seemed, for all the doors were wide open and the lights on. I looked at the car. It was a Morris 8 1940 vintage. I said to my friend, 'That's odd. The car is at right angles to the road.'" Miss Pepper looked all over the car, but there was no indication as to ownership. "I felt the hairs sticking up at the back of my neck," said Miss Pepper. "There was no way the car could have reversed without going into the ditch." Ah, itchy nose. And I've lost my page. The other incident that concerned... Oh, no, I've jumped a page. There was no way the car could have reversed without going into the ditch. Miss Pepper was very puzzled and had a very uneasy feeling. Her friend thought that maybe the occupants had hit some cattle, but although with torches they searched around, there was no trace of anyone. It was not a local car, for the old poacher knew everyone and he didn't recognize it. It was a clear night, and it was a mystery how the old car came to be in that position. With that uneasy feeling, Miss Pepper knew the answer. "Come on, let's get back," said Miss Pepper. "And damn me, the motorbike wouldn't start. Yes, I did get a bit panicky then." However, with a push start, they got the old bike going, and Miss Pepper raced off the old airfield. The next morning, Miss Pepper went out alone to the spot where she had seen the old Morris 8, but there was no sign of the car, or its ever having been there. No oil marks, no tyre marks, nothing. On her way back, she met the old poacher, and he asked her about the car. She replied that someone had broken down and that it had all been sorted out. I knew in my heart it was not so. Don't ask me why. I don't know. Miss Pepper left Cornwall shortly afterwards and has never been back. Yes, I would like to go back to the old haunted airfield, she says, but at 64 I would need a bit of company. I cannot run as fast these days. Definitely deserves a thunderclap. Cracker. I like that one. I've lost my blessed bookmark now. Oh, hang about. Haunted Hornchurch. Yeah. Yep, these look nice and shortish. Oh, goodness me. It's been a long day, folks. Apart from this itchy bloody nose. As happens these days, I wake up at stupid in the morning. I did this yesterday. I was downstairs, sat out on the patio. It was relatively dry. 5 to 6 in the morning reading Gardener's World magazine. No, tell a lie. I was sorting through my Gardener's World magazines to try and find an article. So we'll come to that half time. So cheers, me beers. Do you know what? That cider's not bad. I'm glad I bought a 4-pack of it because we'll have some more of that at the end of the week. So slange me, everybody. Actually, we might go for just having a quick look to see if there is a shorter one that I can do. I might actually run out of book tonight. Oh, you know what? No, I'm going to go back to the. I'm going to go back to the beginning. Bear with, folks. Here we go. So we'll read this one. But I've got to be careful because it does concern Wing Commander Guy Gibson and his troublesome dog. So not everyone sees a ghost, like the case of Miss V. Summers from Fish Ponds near Bristol. Fish Ponds, literally, just over there. In 1982, literally just over there. In 1982, she and a friend were on holiday in Cornwall. They were touring the countryside and they stopped to look in an old churchyard. Her friend pointed out some airmen's graves and Miss Summers went over to see them. It was a very hot day without the slightest breeze, she said. Suddenly, as I bent over the RAF graves, a really terrific wind came. I know the feeling that's happened to me, usually Brussels sprouts. They both looked at each other and hurried inside the church. It was an eerie feeling, said Miss Summers, who later found out that there had been an airfield nearby. Miss Sheila Heeple from Lowestoft says, I too have experienced the eerie feeling of one such place, the Aviation Museum at Flixton, Bungay. She added, I can see and feel the presence of the young men in their bomber jackets every time I visit. I have never voiced this before because I do not want to appear odd. Miss Sheila Heeple, read that one. Ex-warrant officer Evans, 31 years service in the Royal Air Force, had a spooky feeling while at number 202 maintenance unit in Long Parish, Hampshire. The place was a massive ammunition dump for the D-Day landings. It is near the village of Wherwell, and the sergeant's mess was a collection of Nissan huts in the woods and was very remote and isolated. In the middle of the arms dump was an ancient monument about 75 feet high. It was my duty to patrol this forest, said Evans, and when near this area, a presence was felt. It was reputed to be haunted near the monument. Over the years, many people have reported eerie happenings in hotels and public houses that were frequented by wartime airmen. One such place is the Black Bull at Welton near Lincoln. It was a favourite meeting place for air crews and ground staff from nearby Royal Air Force Scampton. Ghostly footsteps have been heard many times on the stairs and on the landing, but when investigated, no one ever saw a sign of life. Right, I think that'll be it for half time. I think we'll have a thunderclap. Oh, that was a big gulp of cider. Slange. Yeah, we'll carry on. We'll carry on picking our way through these. Right, it's wasabi. Sorry, it's Japanese rice style mix time. Oh, goodness me. So, what have we been up to today? We have been cat sitting. Sorry, I am enjoying my wasabi mix. Not wasabi mix, Japanese style mixed rice snacks. They're very nice. Right. As I said on Sunday Night Ghost Stories, on a Sunday, I cleared out the garage last week so I could reclaim the potting bench in there. So one of the things, by regaining the potting bench in the garage, it means the old wallpaper pasting table in the extension in the kitchen can now be used as a safe haven for seedlings. So they can all go there and not get eaten by slugs and snails, in theory anyway. There we go, we'll enlarge that. So those are all my sunflowers, and there are some onions and some Brussels sprouts, and on the windowsill are my tomatoes that need planting out now, and some more Sweet William. So yeah, so great stuff. So let's skip along to how OCD am I? There are my watering cans. Could do with a few more actually. So scrolls on. Oh, this was the other day. So when it was sunny rather, I sat outside and had my breakfast, and this was at 5 to 6 in the morning, and I was going through all my Gardener's World magazines, or some of my Gardener's World magazines, to try and find an article on how to make raised beds from old pallets. Still haven't found the article, but I did find a video online which showed you how to do it. So anyway, so scrolls on. Oh yeah, of course. Then who wakes up and comes down onto the patio but His Royal Derpiness, and he takes my seat. Of course he does. So anyway, so right, so this was my project on Monday, and these are old pallets that I picked up from various places. Whenever I'm out and about and I see a pallet, I ask, is that going free? And they say yes, and I will collect it. So here is a pallet, and following a video that I watched online, it was prized apart and reduced down to its component parts. But then what you can do, this is the clever bit, what you can then do is turn it into that, and it's essentially a raised bed. absolutely brilliant. I think the only thing I had to add to that was some screws and some nails, because that was the most time-consuming part. Wasn't all the beer burps. Goodness me, we've had the beer burps at 37 minutes and 3 seconds. Do apologise. The most time-consuming part wasn't actually putting it together. It was getting all the bloody nails out, the old nails out. So, but once that was done, there we go. We were off. So I've got a few more pallets, and I'm hoping to pick up a couple more tomorrow. So I'm going to be making some more raised veg beds, and might also make a meter meadow as well, which is like a wildlife area, meter meadows. So yeah. Anyway, so that was that, and exciting times. Oh, and this was a plant growing in my garden. The plant is to the right. That's a vegetable to the left. It's a thistle. Look at the side. That thistle is literally 6 feet high. Absolutely marvelous. Now, the area behind the thistle, I've left at the moment as a wildlife area, but once that's gone over in the autumn, I will clear it, and that's where I plan to house my greenhouse. Yes, folks, I'm going to get a greenhouse, so I need one, quite frankly. I deserve one, quite frankly. So anyway, that was that, and yeah, here's the wildlife area. So it's mostly Herb Robert, and I forget what the other one is. It's not Spurgeon. Let me just look it up. I forgot what his blessed plant's called now. I did do an OBS identifier on it. No, Apple just call it plant. OBS identifier. Let's go the proper route, shall we? Recent. What did you do on Wednesday night? I tuned in to watch Ghost Stories, but instead I watched A Confused Man from Dudley trying to identify plants live on the internet. And it is a identification in progress. Get wiggle on. Hedge woundwort. Hedge woundwort. So there we go. So that's good stuff. It's brilliant for wildlife. Absolutely humming with bees and things. Pollinators, essentially. And that's it. I don't think I've got any more photographs to share. I've got some of my poppies that I can show you. These are my California poppies, so absolutely beautiful. Love these. Really need to grow more poppies. Oh, just beautiful plants. Absolutely stunning. Yeah, winner, Christmas dinner. So that's pretty much it, really. Like I say, I'm minded of the fact that we've got football on tonight, so I need to be out of the library by about 9 o'clock. It really doesn't say anything extra here. It just says brewed in accordance with the German purity law. That's troubling. German wheat beer. That's all it says. It's very nice, though. What did you do on Wednesday night? I didn't watch Ghost Stories, but instead I was treated to A Confused Man from Dudley with holes in his head, stuffing his face with little Japanese snacks that he was spilling all over the floor. and the snacks. Talk amongst yourselves. I've got some fan mail. Almost forgotten. Goodness me. We've had a Beer 52 parcel turn up. So these are the subscription beers that I do kind of every other month. So I don't know what these ones are. But as you can see, I haven't opened the box yet, so got a nice card. Ah, happy Father's Day, isn't that lovely? I don't know what I fathered, but apart from a ghost story show. We got some snacks. We got Tex-Mex cheese tortilla mini chips. And we've got some Braves and Mega Mix sweet chili and lime, right. And then we've got the Ferment magazine that I never read, but right. Tell you what, we're going to go through the beers here, and then we'll tell you what the beers are. So they are Mexican Ale, Vera Negra, 4.7%. I get the feeling these are all Mexican for this one. Gecko Mexican Salt and Lime Lager, 3.4%, not bad. Perro del Mar Light IPA, 3.8%. Again, I think they're Mexican. And we've got Fuga WC Pils. I think it's a Pilsner. 5.5%. Oh, they're getting stronger now. And we've got this one, which is, can't read what that says. Oh, God. Chocolada Mictlan Mexican Spiced Porter. Oh, it looks good. 3.7%. I think that's a chocolate one. Exciting times. Keeping half an eye on the candles here. PTC, which is my local council. Czech Dark Lager. Good little illustration on there. Bribon Ludica. What was that? What was that one? Let me see what it's. PTC is 5%. Oh, we're getting stronger again. Ludica, and this is a light stout with full flavour, with classic roastiness, with notes of coffee, chocolate, and caramel. I'm in love. 4.6%. So that's no lightweight. Loba Negra Craft Porter, Mexican beer, another Mexican beer. 5.5%. And finally, the last couple. We've got 38 caliber IPA. Doesn't say, can't read what that says. 6%. Oh, goodness me. We're on to the good stuff now. Fanfaron Ludica, 3.4%. Come towards the end of this now, Derp. Lager Pokal from Moreno's, 3.8%. And finally, Caballo Blanco. English summer ale. Oh right, we're suddenly in this country again. 5.2%. So they will be heading down to the fridge, and we will be enjoying them possibly on Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra on a Friday. Bye, Mel. Right. Ghost Stories Part 2. And then we can go downstairs and watch England disappoint us or amaze us. Here we go. Not that, here we go. At the Petwood Hotel in Woodhull Spa, Lincolnshire, a female security officer is convinced it is the home of the ghost of Guy Gibson and a bunch of his messmates. Only 5 days after starting there in September 1984, it happened. At about 8 p.m, she heard a phone ring. The switchboard had been taken out and there were only 2 live phones. It was not one of them. She logged the detail. In her own words, "Suddenly it became very cold. I was in reception and we put the heaters on. Then there was an almighty hammering. We had had vandals 2 nights earlier, so I called the police. There was nothing to be seen at all." "Next night I heard sounds like a party. There was laughter and I heard footsteps. The sounds came from the direction of the Squadron Bar." The officer described here. No. Have we jumped a page? No, we haven't done. The officer described hearing sounds like that for a night of. The officer described hearing sounds like that for a night or two, and it was then she saw it. Nothing quite tangible, but she says, "I was really frightened." During the last war, number 617 Squadron, the famous Dambusters, moved to RAF Woodhull Spa, and the Petwood Hotel was commandeered in the village. It was used by Wing Commander Guy Gibson, Victoria Cross, and the Special Crews. Gibson was killed in a Mosquito of number 627 Squadron on a raid against Reddit, Germany, on the 19th and 20th of September 1944. His aircraft, which was from Woodhull Spa, crashed in Holland. The only story which is not an RAF ghost is Sandeman's ghost, page 91. It has been included because the ghost is seen on an RAF airfield and is unusual to say the least. Many of the stories in this book have never been published before. They have been brought to light by diligent research, and the majority are supported by eyewitness accounts. I have not set out to solve the happenings. I trust that within the following pages I can give food for thought, that ghosts really do exist, and what you read is not figment of the imagination or self-hypnosis. I would like anyone who has experienced a ghostly happening or who knows of someone who has to please get in touch with me via the publishers. All paranormal happenings must be Royal Air Force or on airfields, and will be for possible future publication. Bruce Barrymore, Halpenny, Roma, Italy. Right, we're going to jump ahead loads of pages here because we've pretty much read that section. I need to sort my nose out. I need to sort my nose out. I need to blow my nose. So we'll be back in a few seconds, and run VT. Ah, that's better. Slange. Oh, that Weiss beer is lovely. Was it 5%? 5%. Cheers. Oh. Question is, Derpy, am I going to be able to stay awake to watch England tonight? Because if they play as boringly as they have recently, I'll probably fall asleep before the whistle starts. So, all right, here we go. Haunted Hornchurch. In 1957, Ray Downs was called up for his national service and after training at West Kirby was posted to Royal Air Force Hornchurch in April. He was an admin orderly, a jack of all trades. And after a few weeks, he became a voluntary member of the crash crew attached to the fire station. Ray Downs soon became aware that Hornchurch was haunted, and he heard many stories. The first incident was a story told by the RAF police dog handlers about an area of grass by the main hangar. Oh, the beer burps again. Do apologise. Their dogs would not, or only with great reluctance, cross this piece of grass, which was approximately 30 yards square. This small piece of grass, surrounded by thousands of square yards of airfield, had like an invisible force field around it. Hyphenations all over the place here. He's written it as this small piece of grass, hyphen, surrounded by thousands of yards of airfield, had like an invisible force field around it. But the hyphen doesn't go anywhere. So it should be this small piece of grass, hyphen, surrounded by thousands of yards of airfield, hyphen, had like an invisible force field around it. Sorry, Bruce, I am proofreading your book for you that came out over 40 years ago. It was said that on this very spot, an NCO fitter was killed during the last war when he walked into the propeller of a Hawker Hurricane fighter that was undergoing an engine test. During the Second World War, Royal Air Force Hornchurch had been in the front line, and during the Battle of Britain, the airfield had suffered at least 20 separate bombing attacks. The airfield goes back to the early days of the First World War, and throughout both wars, it was a very active airfield, housing many fighter squadrons, which included numbers 403 and 411 Canadian squadrons, number 313 Czech Squadron, number 340 Free French Squadron, and the Australians with number 453 Squadron. Nearly all were equipped with Supermarine Spitfires, and many brave young pilots from the Hornchurch squadrons died in aerial combat. Some managed to return badly shot up, only to die of their battle wounds. We will have a quick swig up. Still got this bug, folks, so oh, this wheat beer is lovely. We have had it before. Oh, what do you know? We haven't even got through this story yet, and already we have another dead soldier and run beating.
Oh, it's jolly nice of you. Hello, dead soldier. Seen plenty of those in my time.
One summer evening, while on duty in the fire section, AC Downs decided to accompany the police dog handler on patrol, for it was a favourite pastime during the summertime. The police dogs were a pretty unsocial bunch, and the dog on this particular evening was no exception, said Downs. Given the command, it would have been only too pleased to have torn an arm off some poor, unsuspecting sprog. Yeah, again. Given the command, it would have been only too pleased to have torn an arm off some poor, unsuspecting sprog. In the course of conversation, Downs asked if there was any truth in the yarn concerning the dogs not going in certain areas. The police dog handler said he wasn't sure, but as they were approaching the area, they would see what would happen. They would see what happened, rather. Suddenly, the dog stopped and pulled the handle to the left, then to the right. Its hackles were up, and it dug in its paws and wouldn't move. I believe it was only the dog's training. I believe it was only the dog's training that he was finally persuaded to cross the corner section, said Downs. It was very obvious that the animal was distressed, but amazingly, it became his usual hateful self when this invisible barrier had been crossed. The other incident that concerned AC Downs was the time he was allocated duties in the Aircrew Selection Centre. This was housed in a large, rambling building situated on the edge of the airfield. It had formerly been used as the officers' mess. On the first day that Downs arrived for duties in this building, he was told that it was haunted by a fighter pilot who, having crashed, crawled to the mess and died. The same person also informed him that in the past it was the duty of the orderly to sleep on a camp bed in the reception centre on call by the telephone until office staff arrived in the morning. And that one particular airman was found one night in bare feet and pyjamas in a state of collapse on the steps of the guardroom, having run a quarter of a mile from the centre. The result of the inquiry which followed stated that the airman in question was suddenly woken in the early hours of the morning by the lights flashing on and off, doors slamming, and footsteps running up and down the corridors. The airman was discharged shortly afterwards. The building, however, checked immediately after the airman was found by station police. Let's read that again. The airman was discharged shortly afterwards. The building, however, checked immediately after the airman was found by station police, was found to be secure. However, at the time I took all this with a pinch of salt and thought no more about it, said Downs. The duties of the 6 admin orderlies for the Aircrew Selection Centre was the responsibility for the security of the building and to stay in reception until late evening by the telephone for incoming calls, formally to check and lock all office doors and return the keys to the guardroom. During the summer, these duties were no problem, but in winter, the place did assume an oppressive atmosphere. By common consent, the orderlies agreed to share the duties so that 2 were always on duty, and even then it was a rush to lock up and check each office. On numerous occasions, the station police would phone our quarters and inform us that a light had been left on in such and such an office, although the whole building had been checked before going off duty, said Downs. I am not a superstitious person by nature and keep a completely open mind on the subject of the supernatural, but there were many things you couldn't explain. On numerous occasions, you would hear a door slam somewhere in the building, although recently you had personally locked them. You would hear footsteps in the long corridors as if someone was following you, but when you checked the corridor, it was deserted. At other times, you would be by the phone in the reception area, maybe reading, when you would hear movement on the stairs along the landing and continue on to the washrooms. In complete contrast, there would be complete utter silence, regardless of what was happening outside. AC Downs completed the rest of his national service in the Aircrew Selection Centre, and he was demobbed in February 1959. 3 years later, the station closed, and in 1963, the airfield was put up for auction. The airfield soon took on a derelict look, and over the next few years, it lay abandoned. The Spitfires long gone, and now only distant memories. But on certain nights of the year, residents in the locality of the airfield reported seeing a pilot dressed in World War II flying clothes running towards the centre of the airfield. Many others reported hearing the noise of an aircraft engine, and some strange things happened during this period when the old airfield lay dying. Oh, itchy nose, folks. Today, this distinguished and historically important frontline airfield has been demolished and replaced by a housing estate. The only link with those unforgettable days and nights of 2 world wars are the roads named after the pilots. Airfield Way now follows the same route as the one-time perimeter track, which passed the hangar's apron and control tower. Or there are other links with the past, as the spirits of those brave young fighter pilots. Oh, God. Honestly, I think it's hay fever. Let's try it again. Airfield Way now follows the same route as the one-time perimeter track, which passed the hangar's apron and control tower. Or are there other links with the past, as the spirits of those brave young fighter pilots visit their old airfield? Many people who live on the old Hornchurch airfield think there is. I live in a flat on Heronfly Avenue, which is built on the old Hornchurch airfield, says Mrs. Kelvey. And between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. And between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. I sometimes get like a gust of wind going through the flat. I thought it must be a sudden draft, but it has happened when there is no wind at all. It always happens at the same time, and with it, I seem to get a feeling of protection. I'd lay off the sprouts, though. Oh, God, bloody nose. Oh, what are we up to? We've gone through the hour mark, right. We are rapidly heading towards football o'clock, so we're going to speed this up. Well, I've just noticed in Styles that our headline is in the wrong font. That's the one we use. The Ghosts of Royal Air Force Binbrook. Royal Air Force Binbrook is perched on top of the Lincolnshire Wolds, overlooking the village of Binbrook. The airfield opened in June 1940 in No. 1 Group Bomber Command. It was a frontline bomber station throughout the war, and it housed numbers 12, 142 squadrons and 460 squadrons Royal Australian Air Force. There were many losses from the station, and one big disaster. Oh, the beer burps again. There were many losses from the station, and one big disaster was on the evening of the 3rd of July 1943, when an electrical short circuit on Lancaster DV-172 caused the entire bomb load to drop to the ground. Within minutes, the 4,000-pound Cookie and 2 500-pounders exploded, and the bomber disintegrated. Night after night, the bombers took off, and many times on their return, the tired crews had to contend with fog. One such night was on the 17th of December, when 4 aircraft from 460 Squadron crashed after returning from a raid on Berlin. One crashed just short of the runway. After the war, the airfield remained open, and during the early post-war period housed numbers 12, 9, 101 squadrons and the famous 617 Squadron, equipped with Avro Lincolns. Since the latter part of the war, a ghostly figure has been seen many times at the end of the main runway as dusk begins to fall. All sightings report that it looks as if the ghost airman is frantically signalling to an aircraft that is waiting at the end of the runway. But there is No aircraft. It is thought that the apparition was a wartime ground crew sergeant who had been in charge of an aircraft and after bombing up had realized that the bombs had been armed when loaded into the bomber. In an attempt to stop the bomber, the sergeant had chased down the runway, but the aircraft was already getting airborne, and as it passed overhead, it exploded, killing all the crew and the sergeant. The ghost airman was seen many times during the late 1940s. Oh, God. Hay fever, folks. Don't get it. Sound. Oh. In 1952, some of the Binbrook squadrons began to re-equip with the English Electric Canberra jet bombers. Number 101 Squadron re-equipped with Canberras in 1955. And one of the 101 Squadron ground crew working on the Canberras was Dick Green. One night in October 1955, at the end of a late flying session, it was about 11 p.m. and the aircraft had all landed and the last aircrew had been picked up by the Jeep and driven away, leaving the ground crew to get on with their various tasks, checking instruments, bomb racks, refueling, tying, and battening down. The hyphenation here. At the end of October 1955, at the end of a late flying session, and there's a two hyphens here. So it should be at the end of October 1955, at the end of a late flying session, checking instruments, bomb racks, refueling, tying, and battening. That doesn't make sense. Bruce, that's not how you use hyphens, mate. What was unusual about this particular night was that there happened to be an aircrew member still on the dispersal unit and dressed in his flying clothes. It was long after the last of the normal aircrew had departed. The mystery flyer was doing something on the ground quite close to Dick Green. He did not take too much notice, with being too preoccupied in covering up one of the wheels with the wheel cover and in a hurry to get the task finished and off to get his supper, as of course all the ground crew were. I do remember thinking at the time that there was something a bit odd going on here, having an aircrew man still hanging around after the rest of them had long since gone, said Green. Within a short time, the ground crew had finished for the night, and they all trooped to the dispersal hut to sign the books. Then they made their way across the airfield to number 7 block, about a quarter of a mile away, to collect their irons, eating utensils, and then to the cookhouse for a well-earned meal. They had almost reached their block when Corporal Parsons suddenly turned round and whispered, "Christ, there's a bloody ghost!" With that, they all looked round, and there was the very same mystery flyer behind them. He was not actually following them, but heading in the general direction of the main gates of the officers' married quarters. He passed by Dick Green and his mates and just wandered off into the darkness, leaving in his wake 5 teeth-chattering airmen. I personally am quite convinced that whoever he happened to be was no ordinary flesh and blood airman, despite his ordinary and quite solid appearance, said Dick Green. What struck me about the mystery flyer, apart from the fact of the deviation from the normal air crew practice, was the intense loneliness and impression of extreme remoteness and disorientation that surrounded him, just as though he were in a world of his own. Come towards the end of this just as well, because my nose is killing me at the moment. So slouch. In the magnificent United Federation of the Planet shot glass, again, big shout to viewers Kirsten, Steve in the United States. Cheers, me beers. Since the war, there have been many ghostly happenings at RAF Binbrook. Some involved the police guard dogs that simply refused to venture into certain areas and buildings on the station. There were many incidents, and some time after seeing the mystery flyer, Dick Green had another most unusual experience that cannot be understood. It was another spooky experience, he says. It occurred one particular Saturday night when he was duty armourer. A duty armourer is obliged to lock himself in the station armoury after thoroughly checking that the premises are empty and that both front and rear heavily reinforced main doors are thoroughly secured. He then has to lock all the inner doors and finally lock himself into the tiny inner office that was situated. Again. He then has to lock all the inner doors and finally lock himself into the tiny inner office that was situated at the end of a long, well-lit corridor with switches at intervals of so many feet apart. Oh, I think we'll do one more. No, we won't. No. This will be, we'll finish this chapter off, so this meant that there were about 4 separate switches which are switched either off or on as progression is made along the corridor. So there I was on this particular Saturday night lying on my bed reading, he said. I was secure in the knowledge that all the doors were locked and that I was the only person on the premises. When, to my horror, I heard the sound of each switch clicking on and off in the passage on the other side of the door, just as though there was someone walking along the passage and using the switches. No sound of footsteps, just the clicking of the switches. Click, 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 then silence. On that particular occasion, Dick Green remained in his room, and needless to say, his duties finished much earlier than normal. He did not venture out to see his ghostly visitor, and as he says, it's a funny old world, isn't it? It definitely does deserve a thunderclap. So, media assets. So there we go. There's a picture there. So it says, now all is silent, only the wind and the ghosts at RAF Binbrook in Lincolnshire, once a busy bomber airfield and post-war housed the Lightning jet fighters. Now the control tower stands silent, the keeper of memories. Yeah, don't ladle it on too thick, Bruce. Right, let's just pick up where we're going to be for next time. Oh, God, guarantee the moment I go downstairs, my nose will stop itching. But anyway, cheers, me beard. Oh, delicious. So, oh, delicious, sir. Right, that's it for tonight. Goodness me, the cat, that one's gone out. That's fine. So we're off downstairs to watch England humiliate themselves or win magnificently. Let's find out. I'm going to have some supper as well. So fingers crossed, we'll be back for, brace yourselves, Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra on a Friday. So until then, as always, it behoves me to say thank you for watching. Why? Why not? What else are you going to do on a Wednesday night in the middle of June than watch a confused man from Dudley with holes in his head, drink ghost stories and read alcohol? It's the World Cup. Come on, folks. Come on, you can do better. I can't, but you can do better. Anyway, so until next time, as always, thank you for watching. Stay safe. Stay out of trouble. Please don't have nightmares. Good night.